Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Awesome to see you. I'm Wade Convay. I think I was supposed to stand on one side or the other, but the screen is kind of everywhere. Um, I'm a UX director on the Google design team. And it's awesome to be here at Config, catch some of the new amazing announcements, and see some of the great work, as well as spend a little bit of time with all of you. So raise your hands if design is ever a bit of a mess on any of your teams or within your organization. A little bit, same for us. This is what I want to talk to you about today. And it's a secret to creating great work, or we believe it is. I have the privilege of representing a wonderfully talented cross-functional group on Google design team. I don't know what that beep was. And the amazing opportunity to share stage to help shape the experience across Google and for hundreds of people, and to help Google products feel more like Google. We do that by providing foundational resources like material design, Google's design system, fonts, typography, icons, and design tools. We operate centrally within Google, and our primary users are other designers and product teams within Google. We partner with teams to make sure that the latest and greatest designs get into apps like Workspace, Maps, Photos, Search, and Gemini. And it's really straightforward. Our teams have central design directions, and we seamlessly hand it over to product teams who gracefully embrace it. Our system, our tools, typography, code, all of it. Product managers prioritize our updates. They listen to our recommendations. Designers have all the resources they need and are rarely blocked. Figma certainly helps us. And engineers have a complete code library. It's all pre-built, all platforms, all code bases, right off the shelf. And with such an efficient process, we don't have any tech debt. So leaving us, the designers and creatives, with ample time to ride around on scooters, enjoy amazing snacks, stay inspired, and think deep thoughts about what's next. Okay, at least that's what I thought, and when I pictured joining Google about 10 years ago. I had imagined that building products would be relatively seamless. Google would have it all figured out. And while there certainly is a ton of magic that happens within those walls, it's really much more complicated. So Google's a massive organization, no surprise, and we make hundreds of products, all by super talented, very opinionated people serving users around the world. And the scale introduces a level of mess. Hard to fathom unless you're part of it. And so that's what I want to share with you today. It's kind of an unvarnished look of some of the things that we've done, some of the mistakes we've made, and how we ultimately try to drive design across an organization of this size. I'll share some things that we've learned, and hopefully there'll be a few takeaways that you can experiment with your teams. So obviously you can all relate to the process being a bit messy at times. And this isn't necessarily the environment we aspire to. I would certainly love my job to be a little bit more calm every day. But what if we started to think of the mess not as a bug, but more as a feature, and an integral part of the design process, and a key driver of innovation? A little over 10 years ago, I joined a team called Brand Design. And it was the first team that was ultimately there to actively manage the brand. Prior to that, there were several creative and design teams, but they were dispersed through the organization and doing a variety of things. Oh, a little slow. So we basically operated like an internal agency or brand consultancy, and we did a whole wealth of things. Everything from research and insights, brand strategy, naming, identity development, brand communications, helped with packaging, even retail and experiential marketing, social, media buying, and even measurement. So it's pretty awesome for a small team structured across 3 locations. But we struggled to keep pace. even in the last 10 years, the company has scaled significantly. It's one that operates somewhat organically, bottoms up, as I'm sure you've heard, and experimentally. Kind of like a lot of flowers blooming all at the same time, if you will. Within a couple of years of launching Brand Studio, many product areas had started their own brand and creative teams. So we were a centralized force, but we were quickly becoming decentralized. Product areas, what we call internal teams, think things like workspace, cloud, search and maps, AI, ads, etc. They all wanted their own dedicated teams to address their unique problems and their scale, and they needed it yesterday. So those teams in turn engaged a lot of external partners. Well, hundreds, actually. Each of them generating more and more stuff across the organization. And it was often created in silos, and it was pretty much impossible to show up cohesively as a company. So it was a pretty big mess. So what we did to balance the needs of the vast growing product portfolio and make it, apologies. So how did we balance this fast growing needs and make it more accessible and easy to show up cohesively as a brand? Well, we started something called Brand DNA. And the idea was to unify the work across brand, product, and marketing and make it easy for anyone to create product and experience that were unmistakably Google. It was also our way with communicating with roughly 70,000 other Googlers at the time and telling that story. It was an essential first step, but we wanted to take it further. We had an internal goal of seeing if we could build more tools and less rules, things that would be incredibly easy and efficient to adopt and use. One such thing was an initiative called Web Standards X. It included coded components and pattern libraries that anyone could use. So now, rather than having hundreds of partners all creating different components and different websites, we audited over 450 marketing sites at the time, and this was 10 years ago. With different navigation structures, different folders, different type scales, you name it. We simplified it, and it helped. The new standards were widely adopted, they were much more efficient, and we showed up a lot less messy to many of our users. And the appetite for structure and brand cohesion across Google was top of mind. In 2015, a few teams assembled together inside Google, Creative Lab, Material Design, Search, and Brand Studio to launch a new identity. The story I'd like to share builds on this new identity, and it's not something I think we've shared too much publicly. And it's how this recent update created a whole different mess, but ultimately it led to the creation of a brand asset that we've continued to evolve over the last several years. And that's Google Sans. Let's back up a little. So this is kind of what it looked like 10 years ago when I joined. Many of you will probably remember some of these things, depending on where you were. And if you update the Google logo, you sign yourself up to update a whole bunch of other things across the company. So we briefly considered what it would look like if we treated everything more individual. So like a house of brands, if you will, versus a branded house. Ultimately, the strategy was to connect our products more holistically and have them all come from Google and leverage the best of Google. So we decided to create a structure and leveraging a typographic system to provide, to establish our product names. We built from the forms of the original wordmark and turned that into a typeface that would complement it. We called it Product Sans. But of course, it was never meant to work beyond the word marks. Naturally, designers across Google started using it, liked it, and it was showing up everywhere, including the material design team. They started using it in UI and some of our interfaces. But it was limited. There were no weights, no italics, not sufficiently legible at smaller sizes. It didn't even have all the characters. So there was no way we were going to do languages if we didn't have the glyphs. So the team drove an expansion project to develop it on an entire family that will work across brand, marketing, and product. So we created it, Google Sans. We optimized it for different character shapes, ascenders, descenders, X heights, stroke, contrast, width, and additional weights and italics. But we didn't stop there. Once we got started using Google Sans more broadly, or once it started getting used more broadly, we noticed that it wasn't working in all the places that we needed to, especially body copy, running text, and long-form reading. So we partnered with some of the designers within Search to dial it in even more. We ultimately created Google Sans Text. This followed as an update, or this allowed more of the products to start using this more holistically. And we were able to leverage our own unique typeface across almost all aspects of our products, which was great. And ultimately, it replaced Roboto, which was originally designed for Android by a longstanding member of our team, Christian Robertson. So the next mess, maybe not surprising to some of the designers in the room, was that everyone started accidentally using the typefaces for different things. Google Sans Text, used for headlines. Google Sans was used for body text. And so we never really solved it. Well, lo and behold, a new technology was emerging called variable type, which removes some of the explicit distinctions between different weights and styles. And it sort of auto-magically adjusted to things like optical sizing, which led us to the development of Google Sans Flex, which incorporates a near infinite range of styles across 6 axes. Includes weight, width, optical size, slant, grade, and even rounded. And regardless of context, it automatically is optimized. So you don't need to be a designer or type expert to get to really good results. And it works from the smallest sizes, like wearables, to some of our largest surfaces. So good to go, right? Okay, not quite yet. We were also in the background creating a typeface called Mono to address some of the more technical documentation that we produce. And again, not surprisingly, as soon as we put something out there, people are hungry, they start using it. And it didn't take long to get some feedback from engineers. It wasn't working in the way that they had hoped it would. Some of the type wasn't readable at small sizes, especially in lining situations where they needed it, and some of the glyphs weren't easily recognizable. So today, Gemini is using our latest typeface called Google Sans Code. And as the name suggests, it's uniquely designed specifically for code and has its own interesting quirks and features. In the next couple of months, we're releasing it as an open source font that everyone can use. So keep an eye out for that. It's interesting to look back and realize that every stage of this process was driven by some mess. Mismatched product lockups across the company, lack of range, illegible, inflexible. Every time someone shared feedback, it revealed an unmet need. And our fonts team worked with us to fill those needs. And they created a unique brand typeface that was used across the entire company and still is to this day. Next up, material design. And it's particularly complex design mess that we've been navigating for years. And it's a challenge that genuinely keeps me up at night. And that's because it has the opportunity to influence so much of what we do at Google and touch so many of the experiences that we make, ones that are constantly evolving and deeply interrogated. So with Material 1, or as we like to call it, M1, it was our fundamental assumption and hope that a unified system with a clean metaphor, strong principles, the right patterns, and the right confidence and specifications, we could magically align all of our products. M1 was pure, it was principled, and it was very strict. And then it met reality. Teams facing diverse product needs and deadlines would come back with valid reasons for how it didn't work for them, or it wasn't flexible enough. Take the FAB, this giant button. We called it the floating action button, and to this day, it's still an iconic part of many Google experiences. And it was designed and decreed that the fab was only to be used for the most important interaction in each of the experiences. Clear and simple. But what happens when a product has two or more equally important interactions? Reality kind of broke the rule. In fact, of the matter, there's multiple reasons to have a primary important buttons. We do it all the time. We see it all the time. It's a necessity. So, for example, inbox. Anyone here remember inbox? Use it? It had a lot of love. And the team didn't want the fab to just be an email draft, one simple thing. They had a great idea that they could also have shortcuts to the people you contact most. And it was a great idea. So it turns out M1 wasn't nearly as flexible for the many diverse needs and the growing use cases. Our products were also becoming much more complicated daily. And while we had Android components at the time, a large part of the mess came from the sheer number of tech stacks, I mentioned that earlier, across all of our products. We couldn't support them all. This combination of nuanced product needs and a lack of usable code meant the teams were left to implement their own instantiations themselves. So we had fewer shades of blue, but we had thousands of implementations of similar or same buttons. Not very efficient and not a great way to add coherence across the company. It introduced variation, and it was impossible to update easily. So we knew we needed to encode design decisions in a more efficient way. So for M2, Material 2, if you will, we were going to do things differently. For starters, we were going to fix the mess and encode components for all of our most popular platforms so they could easily be adopted. And so we also built theming, which allowed products to customize the look and feel, kind of what we're showing here. It was an aspect of M1 that was almost too successful. We shipped Android code, which meant that Google products, teams, and third-party teams and app developers alike could use the components. So it was easy, and they actually did it. Small win. But the unexpected result was that everything started to look the same. Google products looked like the rest of the Android ecosystem. Android apps looked like other Android apps, and we sort of lost the uniqueness. So in addition to theming, we had a great idea that we'd fork the design system, keeping one for third-party applications on Android and one for internal Google Teams to leverage. And we called that Google Material. Then we had the ultimate mandate that everybody, by the end of the year, should be using Google Material. And we had an OKR, a top-level OKR from the company. So finally, we had this ability to rally the entire company together to hit this design goal. So we thought, let's do this. But wait, we weren't ready. That OKR, while powerful, was also incredibly painful. First, teams weren't ready to adopt. Everyone had roadmaps, plans set up, and they were trying to make those things happen. Same on our end. We didn't have the components coded. We were months away from being ready to do it. Nor did we cover the needs of enterprise products, which were also expected to update by the end of the year. It wasn't good. So this initiative to differentiate Google products and introduce more flexibility ironically led to a Cambrian effect of internal design systems, with many product teams creating a variation of material. Instead of one system, we had many, dozens. Google Material became less of a unified system and more of a starting place for many products. We had encouraged flexibility, but it, in turn, had created a structure, but we didn't have the infrastructure to support it. We're still keeping it messy. So with M3, we took another shot. We shifted back to one material design system to reduce complexity. We introduced design tokens and an adaptive design system in order to make it more cohesion across all the new form factors that were emerging. We incorporated layouts and the ability to seamlessly expand, from phone to watch, large screens, even XR, while still being sympathetic to each user, their context, and their unique journey. So, at first, tokens were about unlocking dynamic color. We were super excited about this customization feature. It created a framework for standardization across design products and the products. For example, several years ago, we had 181 shades of gray just on the search results page. Just gray. Grays. That's not naming all the other colors, which I also know that number. Turns out, if we atomize designs with tokens, then we were able to go from an automatic propagation and ensure users were able to have a consistent experience. So when material changes a value, it could auto-magically update throughout the system. Even products like Search, who don't use all of our components, could have the benefits. And it worked. A great example is Google Maps. The product had been using so many hard-coded values that none of the designs matched the code. In fact, only about 50% did. And it was practically impossible to keep things straight. So at one point, we figured out how might we evolve that. And so they started using design tokens for their color values. And these color values, we could take the color values from Figma, wire them actually to the code, and the teams implemented. And it took about 6 months to do the first run. But by the end, we had about 95% correlation between what we were using in Figma and what was in product. And what was important was when it came time for Google Maps to update to their new color palette, which was released this year, the changes could be done through updating the tokens. And rather than taking hundreds of hours or months to implement, it took days. And so that was super measurable magic, if you will. So we laid the foundation and an exciting new visual language for M3. And we announced it a couple of years ago. And in practice, we didn't have all the tools. And so what happened was some of the implementations were showing up pretty flat. No pun intended. Tokens solved a technical problem, but product teams facing feature pressure and growth goals deprioritized design updates. They had committed to roadmaps, they had independent development cycles, and therefore continued to fragment how we were showing up. So we turned 10 last year, and we were still looking at ways to make material design better, easier to use, and more helpful. Being successful isn't just about creating a new set of components, providing tokens, specs, code, or even convincing research. It's about making it all work together and through deliberate collaboration with each of our teams. So I want to take a moment and talk about how we're structured and how we do that. So Google Design is a structure based on what we've been learning along all those years, some of the things that I've been sharing, and what our teams need from us. We have 5 portfolio teams that operate both vertically and horizontally. And this diagram doesn't necessarily do it justice because they actually work even closer together than it shows here. And a lot of times we're blending and working together. And I'll also note that this may not be a typical situation for many design teams. It's kind of an embarrassment of riches. We have lots of resources, and in my experience, I've never worked on a team quite this diverse. But that said, I've had a lot of similar and shared experiences and learnings, even in smaller teams. So we have the material design team, who's responsible for creating, maintaining, and evolving the design system over time. We have a design tool chain team that creates the tools to accelerate product design and front-end and the front-end workflow. For example, they create a product that enables the storing and surfacing of our design system, all the data, the tokens, and the guidelines. The Google Fonts team, not surprisingly, handles all the type and iconography across the company. But it also collaborates with type experts around the world and supports much of the open source typography across the web. The team's technology and APIs actually end up serving over 2/3 of the typography across the web, which is pretty impressive. These specialized team gives an incredible depth, some of the magic of specialization and scale that we're able to leverage. So with M2, we learned a hard lesson. Approaching teams with an OKR, a mandate, a checklist, created friction, created some of the mess. So we realized that design needed to be a tool for our partners. We shifted our approach entirely, and we established a customer experience team. We stopped leading with requirements and started leading with questions. We started asking, what problems are you trying to solve? And how can we help? This team is primarily responsible for two fundamental things. They engage the partners to understand their priorities, their needs, their roadmap, as well as championing design across the entire company. Take Gmail, for example. They had a clear goal around improving their smart cards. If you happen to use Gmail, it's the cards that end up at the top of your email that may summarize something like a flight confirmation. So they ladder it all up to the top so you don't have to read and sift through the whole thing. And they wanted to improve on those. So our customer experience team invested in getting to know the problem, the goals, and then they facilitated a co-design session. The partnership was mutually beneficial. So we were able to demonstrate the benefits of M3, how it could adapt to help them, and at the same time, ultimately meet their goals. And so that's where the magic of adoption started happening. Guidance is another moment for us when we actually make sense of all the mess we create. Our content and publishing team is dedicated to driving the narrative and evolving the resources that we rely on, that everybody relies on to adopt our systems. So they codify the work, they create the guidelines, the design kits, and the developer docs that the entire ecosystem can understand and leverage. So for example, creating material design kit as its own product has enabled with a dedicated team, enables them to address customer feedback and make the resource as helpful as possible to users. So when Figma was about to launch UI kits at Config last year, we were able to partner with them and be one of the three default kits at launch. And what it enabled was people to use our system more quickly and easily. Hopefully some of you or some of your teams have had the luxury of leveraging that. And if you have feedback, know that we have a team that's actively listening and addressing it. This content and publishing team also drives design narrative across our company. They run our newsletters and stories externally on design.google. The team is actually here capturing and sharing their experiences of Config. You may see them around. So creating space to make a mess isn't about giving permission to design teams. It's actually a deliberate strategy that we use. So we have rooms filled with sketches, pages overflowing, and we certainly put Figma through its paces. The sheer volume can feel chaotic. That's the mess. This is an example of a working session that I was a part of a couple months ago. In these collaborative spaces, it takes vulnerability to share something raw, a partial thought, as well as humility to recognize that there's a better idea, and the courage to actually take that and build on it. We do this intentionally. So a few months ago, we kicked off an initiative to figure out what's next for our team. We rallied 30-plus creatives across product, brand and marketing, and hardware for a multi-week sprint. In the early days of the sprints, we had the designers intentionally take the work of a peer and build on it. It not only made the work better, but it brought the team closer together. It created a sense of co-ownership and shared belief. And what's amazing about it is it created a culture, not only for the sprint, but it also is shared to this day. so that we have this environment where teams can be more collaborative, more respectful, and work together. The magic happens in those daily shares. It's the buzz in the room, whether it's virtual or in person. And this was also from a few months ago, some of it 10 years ago. But we still do this. And it was super fun to get sort of out of screens and into an environment where we could actually talk and discuss. It was the idea of creating these disparate ideas that are seemingly different and joining them and making a surprising connection. The collaborative energy is where the truly novel solutions come out. So this approach isn't just confined to how we think about teams. It's also how we think about products. So early on, we did traditional A/B testing. We'd test a button, we'd test a color palette, and we very quickly, and probably not surprisingly, realized that it didn't really make sense. It missed the point. Design is really about sort of the system, the gestalt, if you will. So the real power came when we built these rigorous models and testing comprehensive screen updates. This led us to some surprising findings. We intentionally pushed the designs far beyond what we felt comfortable doing and maybe what felt right for the brand or the product. But what was interesting, research showed that people were open to it, and they actually liked it more. They preferred it. They found it more desirable, more creative, more personable. And not only that, it was actually more usable. Some of the design actually helped people find some of the interactions that were most important at the time, whether they're new or whether they're the primary actions. So zooming out and thinking about the entire experience across a series of interactions, an entire app or the whole suite of products is another way to find the magic. So I want to take a moment and acknowledge that we're all sitting on the precipice of maybe one of the most ambiguous times for design, certainly in my lifetime. And I want to share a couple of structured ways in which we're thinking about it internally. First is how we make AI better at design. So we have teams actively working on that, trying to inform and learn. Second is how do we help people, all the designers, developers, be more creative? How do we enable this superpower? And third, how do we help unlock truly adaptive, personalized, maybe even bespoke experiences in the near future? What might that look like? So, what happens to design systems then? I know I don't know. I'm guessing that maybe some of you do. Maybe afterwards you can share with me. But one thing I know for sure is it's going to be messy. But I also know that's going to lead to many amazing innovations and experiences. So I hope I'm giving you a little bit of a glimpse of both the mess and the magic of how we operate within Google, some of the backstory, some of the ways it's influenced how we work. It's complex, it's challenging, and it might not look efficient, but what I've come to appreciate is the mess is part of the process. Certainly we can build and find ways to be more efficient, make better decisions faster, and build better tools. But ultimately, we need to figure out how to operate within this complexity. So I'll leave you with a few things, kind of a short list of learnings that maybe you can take back, experiment with you. So one, just start making. It informs the strategy. It's been something all the strongest design teams I've ever worked for have just done organically. They don't wait for the brief. They don't wait for a clear goal. They sometimes don't wait for sort of insights. They follow their intuition and they go. And they create momentum and they give shape to ideas. Two, find your organizational kin. Not surprisingly, find cross-functional peers that align to the same problems, that are interested in solving them, and go work with them. That 30-person sprint that we did, that's what we were doing. We seek them out. We know who would be up for it. We'd be ready for the chaos. We brought them together, and they showed up. Third, make connections and bring people along. So landing of any of these large-scale initiatives across organizations like many of us operate within is hard. It takes a lot of buy-in and a lot of partnership. And when you have something, codify it, and then scale it. If you're trying to establish some cohesion across teams, they need something to go off. It needs to be real. You need to put it down on paper, if you will, or a place that people can find it. And then keep your feet on the gas. Once you have momentum, keep it rolling. So many initiatives fail if you don't keep driving. There's so much inertia. There's so much burn, so much frustration to try and get these things to happen. So many pressures pushing back on you. If it's important, push through. And 6, make sure you go far enough. I actually suggest going too far. Leverage research, feedback from your audiences. You can always reel it back. Okay, thank you all for joining. Keep an eye out in the coming weeks for some exciting new updates from the Google design team. And remember to embrace the mess, because that's where some of the magic happens. Thank you, thank you. So I think we've left some time and room for questions, and I get a chair, so I feel less awkward. No chair. Nah, just kidding. I think there may be some mics. Feel free game. Oh, I thought we were all going to go for coffee.
Spoiler. Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks for the talk. I have a question about design systems. You asked it, what's in the future for them? I guess, our company really is all in on supporting theming as well, and vibe coders are on the rise. Do you have any thoughts on how to maintain brand compliance and design system compliance in this vibe code world?
That's a great question. I think, so how we're starting to approach it is we expect the idea that a lot of things are going to exist at some of the scale that we operate. So we have today, we have tomorrow, and we have the future. And so we're going to continue to we have a track record for the next, and a plan and a roadmap for the next couple of years. But at the same time, we're setting ourselves to the side, which I mentioned earlier, and thinking about sort of how do we show up for the next generation of experiences. So we have it hits all of our team, but we're experimenting with AI. We have sort of access to sort of a lot of the things internally that Google does, and we're actually figuring out sort of like, what does it look like? Could we get to a place where maybe there aren't components, but there's still a set of rules? And so I don't have the answer, but that's sort of how we're experimenting it, and we have sort of a disciplined way that we're sort of working at both at the same time. And I think we have this belief that is, things are going to change. And so like as those things between are less and yet less utilized, how do we be prepared for more emergent experiences and new ways of developing?
All right, thank you.
Cheers. Thank you for the question.
Hello. So as you continue to scale and evolve design strategy here, how do you manage and balance exploration and discovery with execution and iterative releases?
That's a great question. The terrible answer is have an amazing team that has the lack of ability to say no. And they just go. And we pile it on. I do get some feedback about burnout and seeing how we can do it better. But it's some of the honest truth. But we have a process in which we have an operations team that helps us navigate things like this. So we have our roadmaps. The team has bandwidth is working on them. We have delivery dates that we're all trying to hit, especially when we have things like Android releases. But at the same time, we have the capacity to take on. And so we can actually sort of like flex. And we don't have a very big team, but it's big enough that we can flex to do new asks. So I have briefs sitting in my inbox at any given time to do new sprints with new product teams. So we huddle together, we figure out who has the bandwidth, what things can we slow down a little bit, and then who we can ramp up. But it's kind of a manual process, and it really is like, how do we spread out the love so not all of the same people on the team are getting affected?
At what point do you then decide we've explored enough? Let's aim. Let's shoot a shot.
When it lands. It's a great question. We're in the middle of some stuff that we've been working on. I mentioned a sprint. It was supposed to be multi-week. Well, that's already at about the 6-month mark, and we're pushing on it. But it makes progress every week and every month with individual PAs. So one of the things that we do is we make sure we have momentum and we have buy-in. And so we're cycling it up to leadership and making sure we're getting the signal to say, keep going. And then same from product teams, that they're like seeing the work and they're like, okay, interesting, keep going. And so we go from a very conceptual stage, if you will, and then we go, and this is kind of how we work in many of the things we do, is then we go and work individually product teams. So we take kind of this conceit, and then that has a general set of principles that we're aiming for and an idea. But then we go work with individual product teams and say, like, how does this help solve your problem? And does it? And make it more concrete and start figuring out the details. And that we're kind of in that phase now. And if we're able to land it in some of the teams, then we take that momentum and see if we can scale it to more of the teams.
Thank you for sharing your experience.
Yeah, 100%.
Hi, thanks for your talk today. Question for you. In the face of obviously like crowded roadmaps and pressure from above to move on to the next thing, any suggestions for how to make room for the mess, make room for the play, the exploration that to non-UXers, it may look wasteful, or it may look like, spinning wheels rather than getting traction?
Great question. I think one of the things, I'll try to answer in 2 ways, because we have an interesting team environment that is kind of set up to work a little bit like this, and we built in that, versus other experiences when I worked in search or in maps, where there's, we still did it there a lot. They're big enough organizations we could do it, but there were roadmaps and things that we were trying to hit. And there were smaller teams working on individual features. Ultimately, what I try to do is guide the teams in a rule that they sort of like can create the environment that 20% of their time is dedicated to thinking forward. So some of the ways that we've done that, or other teams that have done it, is we design in 3 to 4 weeks every 6 months to actually just look at new insights, new research, and design against them. And sort of like, and then we cherry pick the best that apply to the product, and then work with product teams and engineering to get those implemented. That's one of the more successful ways that we do it. And it ends up being a practice that the organization understands, and then they see the benefit of it because we start landing these things. And then the rest is iterative. So it's really about kind of striking a balance on each one of those. I think when it goes wrong is ultimately when we don't make 10%, 20% time available.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Hi. I once had a design leader mentor tell me that there are 3 companies that get to invent new patterns, and that's Microsoft, Apple, and Google. So congratulations on that. And then the rest of us are really borrowing from what those giants have set. I think as we try to think about our design system, one of the things that we try to figure out is how do we balance using those patterns versus and standards to create consistent products versus leveraging them as a crutch that kind of gets in the way of going through any kind of like greater exploration or pushing beyond standard patterns to kind of get to a better level of innovation. So at Google, where you have such a language, how do you maintain that kind of balance in your design culture?
That's a good one. I think one of the things, and maybe why we get some of the credit for it, is this is like a wildly big company with a diverse set of problems. And we have all of those things internally, right? I might present, and we have kind of a unique position, as I mentioned, a little different reality with the Google design team. But our product teams struggle with that as well. And so I think it's just a balance. Like one of the things, like we're pushing all of the time, and we push pretty far out because we know when we hit some of the realities, it's going to get drawn back in, or some of the metrics that we need to hit and make happen. It's a little bit of like a chicken and egg thing that we are sort of constantly sort of evaluating. We take more risk where we can, and so we're more calculated when we have to be. I think that's the thing, but in what we expect and hope, and we're sort of entering in a world where hopefully we're excited about a whole set of new emerging behaviors. What we're watching is everybody everywhere making and finding new things, and it's super exciting. I think some of the ways that we're thinking about it is like we want people creating across the company, across the world, all these amazing stuff. And then if there's things that are resonating or particularly worth scaling, then we want to figure out how to scale them. So that's some of the things that we do as well too. We don't necessarily scale right from the bat. We have to make sure it's like, is it cool? Is it interesting? Is it going to reach a new set of users? Is it going to solve a new problem? And if so, our team is kind of responsible, like, is it only for that product, or will this thing work on 10 of our products? And if it does, then we try to take that and scale it.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, Wade. So a question for you. You mentioned everything was starting to look the same across products and all these different platforms. How did you land on the evolution of M3 that made it feel uniquely Google?
Ooh, another time, honest answer. The idea for M3, our problem at the time wasn't trying to have things look like Google. Our problem, and some of it is like we also support Android, so there's like a little bit of like some push-pull in there. The goal was actually to innovate, to actually push past, and sort of like have Google show up in a new and surprising way. So our goal really wasn't trying to align at that time. So with Material U or M3, we were actually trying to be more interesting, more exciting. The other thing is it was boring at the time. Like users are looking, they're seeking out more interesting, surprising experience. We knew, and I'm sure all of you did as well, is people are using these tools all day, every day, their phones, their devices, and they actually want them to be an extension of them. They don't necessarily want it to be Google. We get feedback, it's like, hey, our parents use that stuff. Now I want the next new thing, whatever that is and whoever is creating it. We want to be part of that conversation. So we actually are continuously challenging the org to say, like, how do we show up? What does it mean to be Google? And how do we push and pull? And I think what we're seeing is like there's a lot of co-creation with users that they want push and pull. They want personalization. They want it to be unique to them. And so we're at this kind of like, it's always in tension. And I say our team also gets feedback from the rest of the organization. It's like, hey, you guys made all this stuff. Can you help reel it back in and make it look like Google? And so we're constantly always like pushing out, pulling back in, and trying to find a balance and seeing what the organization is ready for and what users want.
Along those lines, when do you know that you want to push an incremental change versus a big evolution?
I think there's usually signals, like when is the right time and worth the effort. So right now we're heading into an entirely new era, and it's not going away. So that's a pretty big impetus for us to say, hey, we had a fairly mature design system before, and we were trying to sort of iterate on it and make it more special, more unique, more attractive to people, things that they enjoyed. But then there's a whole new technology coming in with AI, and it doesn't necessarily feel the same. So that's one of those times when an innovation, like clearly an innovation comes along, that it's a big signal to change. I'd say usually we're rarely trying to be iterative unless it makes sense. If it makes it easier to use, of course. If it's if it's not a noticeable change, of course. But if we can, we're always trying to push some way to to stand out, to give people an impression, to have them feel something, right? That was one of the big goals of Material U. If we moved away from like utility to expression and being able to feel stuff.
Thanks.
Of course.